and certainly she comes to it with certain qualities, I think, that will bode well for him. Ultimately, though, the evidence and facts are what the evidence and facts are, and they seem to be very compelling. Now, she and any attorney, right, will await discovery. In New York, we have what's called open file discovery. That is, as soon as he gets back and is arraigned, prosecutors have 15 days to get all the discovery. They can get another 30 if it's voluminous, which I think they will do. On the issue of extradition, though, I think as it stands now, the district attorney is presenting the case to a grand jury. We know, right, Laura, that a grand jury doesn't decide guilt or innocence. They simply decide whether there's reasonable cause to believe that a crime was committed and that this defendant committed it. And a simple majority have to do that. And so that process will play out. Whether he waives extradition is an open question. He has a right to challenge it. And you heard there DA Bragg say he may waive, but you have to wait till Tuesday. And that's because any waiver of a fight to be released to New York has to make sure that the defendant voluntarily and knowingly knows he has a right to do that. And so, you know, it's a challenging case by any stretch of the imagination, no matter who defended or represented him. But I think the introduction of Ms. Agnifilo is certainly a solid development for him.
Well, you know, I want you to listen to this, Scott, some of the analysis that Karen gave about this case earlier this week alone. Listen.
And so it'll be interesting, it'll be interesting to see where the opportunities are for him to defend himself. And it's looking more and more like I think he could potentially mount a psychiatric defense. You know, I think what Marianne was just saying is exactly right, because what's he playing to the cameras versus is he having some sort of psychiatric event happening right as we speak, and are we watching it in real time on TV? That those are some of the things that will come into play, I think, in this case.
Scott, a psychiatric defense. Do you see that?
Possibly. And this is an individual who we know is very intelligent, very highly educated, and by all reports functioned extremely well, extremely highly, until recently. And over the last couple of years, he increasingly withdrew, first from his job, later from friends, and finally from family. And that certainly indicates a diminishing of his cognitive state and his mental state. But does that mean that he truly spiraled into clinical or legal insanity? I think that's really a stretch. Was he a troubled young man? Is he a troubled young man? I definitely believe that's the case. I also highly suspect that he's narcissistic and delusions of grandeur. I think in his own mind, he's something of almost like a Batman character, a vigilante, a do-gooder, like he seemed to admire Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. So diminished capacity, possibly, but true clinical or legal mental illness, I think that's a real stretch.
A really good point. Just saying that somebody has a psychiatric need is not the legal standard. Can he appreciate what the crime that took place? Is he competent to stand trial? These are things we have to also unpack. But Pete, let me get to you here, because the identity tip from the San Francisco police, how does that tip go from the FBI to the NYPD? Because no one was revealing a name, of course, until after the arrest. And the chief detective said Mangione wasn't even on their radar until that arrest. What's going on here?
Well, from my understanding, the tip comes from the family in the sense that they reported him missing. And then it's the San Francisco Police Department that looks at the photo, I assume, that the family gave of their missing son, and looked at the photo that NYPD released. And the detective said, hey, this looks like a match. And then they get that information from the San Francisco FBI to the New York FBI and back to NYPD. It takes a while to do that. And you have to remember there's a lot of information coming in these investigations. His name, his identity is important. But frankly, even if NYPD had the identification, his actual name, what's really almost more important at that point in the investigation is where is he and how do we locate him? Because NYPD, if they had that information, they'd have to make a very calculated decision as to whether to release that name to the public or hold on to it for investigative needs and trying to, maximize the secrecy of it, if you will, before it became public. either intentionally or from a leak.
Does it strike you as odd, Joey, that the NYPD is telling the New York Times that they have not spoken with the Mangione family?
So, there certainly would be, pursuant to an investigation, some outreach to the family. And so I don't know what those efforts were. Certainly they didn't bear any fruit to the extent that they did not speak to them, but that would be a source of plentiful information. We do know, though, that there was a disconnect of some time period, his mother filing a missing persons report for him, there being indications he hasn't spoken to his family since July, there being other indications, Laura, about people, his friends looking for him, he had commitments to a wedding, etc.